Hi there, and thanks for coming to this session. My name is Ken Oestreich, and I'd like to take the next 20 minutes or so and talk a little bit about uh, a take on marketing for engineers. If you're building products inside your company for your company, this session is about how to build products your company will love. So it's a little bit of a angle on how to take great ideas that are for internal consumption and develop them and market them almost as if they were commercial products. So a little bit of a primer, if you will, on marketing for engineers. A little bit about me. I run Fountainhead product marketing. I've been in B2B SaaS essentially my entire career. I mentor a bunch of small companies that introduce products into the market. I'm a recovering engineer. I used to be an electrical engineer. I turned to the dark side of marketing, and I'm here giving sessions like this. So, with no further ado, a little deeper dive on me. As I said, I'm an electrical engineer. These are Maxwell's equations for electromagnetic theory. Somewhere along the line, I derived them. I'm not sure I can read them anymore, but at least it's in my background. Work for a bunch of big companies, work for a bunch of startups and small ones, a couple of open source, a couple of security, et cetera. So kind of a broad experience in marketing technology products. And definitely want to say I've been part of some craters also, right? Some companies that just went south, and frankly, learned a lot. So if you ever find yourself in a place in a company that's going south, actually, there's a lot you can learn from that in terms of how to pivot, how to prioritize, et cetera. So I reluctantly recommend that experience to anybody. So what I do day to day is I help companies get to something called product market fit. Product market fit, kind of quickly, is, at least my definition, is when you build a product with a bunch of features, you find a market, and you adjust the product in the market, who you're selling to and what you're building, until they meet perfectly. And one of the common measures to know that you've done a good job is this notion of the Sean Ellis test, which is a qualitative way of going to your customers and say, hey, how would you feel if you could no longer use this product? And basically, when 40% or more of your customers say, I would be very disappointed if I didn't have access to this product. If more than 40% of your customers are saying that, you're doing a great job. If customers could be a little disappointed or they don't care, your product isn't that important to them. You haven't really hit what's called market fit. And what I try to do is help companies and engineers get to a point where customers love their product so much they can't live without it. So that's my day job. What we're going to do here is say, well, what if you were asked to build an internal monitoring product for your executives? I'll move my picture around a little bit here. You're charged with using a Netrio style backend, and your executives come to you and say, hey, we need a simple way where we can monitor our SaaS product, make sure it's online, make sure it's stable, make sure it can grow as demand grows, et cetera. So maybe build something that can give us a dashboard of uptime and warnings and resources and service level reports and things like that, right? That take raw data from an application, one application or more, maybe it's Netrio plus a bunch of things, and provided an executive dashboard for that. And we'll sort of come back and forth to that as an example, just to illustrate some principles. So the question is, where do you begin? What do you start building things, et cetera? And what you really should do first is think about building a product, even if it's a simple one, that users want and need. Do some research, right? So for who, right? Who are you building this for? Who's this audience? Are the users executives? Are they managers? What are their roles? They're using this in what context? Are they using it daily? Are they only using it during crises? Interview these people and find out what do they really need. Second is, what's the problem? Why are you being asked to do this? What information do they really want? What's the value add that we're producing with this application, or what new capability are we giving the executives, let's say, or the audience or the users? And what happens to their job, to their role, if this information is not available, right? What's the cost to them? This will give you context on what it is you're building. And finally, I always like to do a little analysis of what's the day in the life, what's the job to be done that user is going to be doing. How are they using this app? In what context are they using this app? Inside of what workflow might they use the app? How often? Is it daily, weekly? Again, only during crises. How would they use it? Because that will inform you a little bit about how to design the product and what needs to be in it and what not. So use these questions, right? For who, what's the problem, what's your context or day in the life that you're using this product in. So those are the first questions you should be asking yourself. Now, the other thing is drilling down on this slide. They may say they want uptime and warnings and resource and capacity stuff, but you need context. So to reinvestigate this slide, ask them, well, you say you need reporting on uptime, but what services do you need uptime for? Why do you want to know this? What threshold do you need to know? Does five decimal places, 6 decimal places, 2? When is uptime unacceptable or downtime unacceptable, et cetera? Ask open-ended questions like, who needs to know about these warnings? Do they need to be integrated with other systems, or is it just nice to know? Open-ended questions like, you say you want information on resources and capacity, but what are the thresholds? Does this have to do with economics? Does it have to do with risk aversion? How often do you need to know this, right? So think about open-ended questions to better define what your customer, what your user is asking you for, right? And finally, they want service level reports. Similarly, who's asking the question? What are those thresholds? How often? Don't assume you know, right? This is Buddhist notion of beginner's mind. So even if somebody says, I need information on uptime, probe a little bit and go, well, what do you mean by uptime, right? And how often, et cetera. So ask a lot of questions. Don't make any assumptions about what this customer thinks they need or what this internal customer thinks they need. So switching gears, question is, what makes a successful product? Is it just its functionality? What should you be thinking about in terms of success goals for designing and building this thing? So the first thing you might want to think of is, conventionally, you might think, well, it's got to ship on time. The updates have to ship on time. I don't want there to be any downtime. How many trials do we have? How many subscribers or users do we have? Like, these are relatively typical conventional metrics, but frankly, they don't give you the information that you probably should be asking for. So just to put a different spin on this, think about improved metrics that have to do with, are you generating the right value, meeting the needs that those customers said they needed? Is it helping provide value in terms of, let's say, making the company money or saving the company money? And we'll talk about what value means in a minute, but can you document that it actually ends up providing that value that you say it can? A really great metric is active use. Not how many people are subscribed, because you could be subscribed and not using the product. You want to know how many people are actively using the product on a regular basis, because you could have 1,000 executives subscribed to the service and nobody uses it. Or you could have 1,000 executives subscribed to the service and 95% of them use it daily. That's a great metric. Similarly, you want a metric if you introduce a new feature or service, what's the active use for that new thing you've introduced, that new feature? If no one uses it, what good is the feature? And then finally, that Sean Ellis test I showed you before, which is, once this thing has been rolled out and people are using it, you conduct a little test. How valuable is this? And if a goodly number say, I can't live without it, I'd be really disappointed if you took it away or retired it, then you know you've done a good job. And if the executives go, in this hypothetical situation, I could do without it, then maybe it's not providing the value that you were hoping it would. So the next step is drill into that user profile, the user journey, who's going to be activating your product. This is more than just like writing epics for coding, right? Again, figure out who's using this thing. Are they using it with someone or with some other product? Are they going to be using it at home or in the office or mobile? How often, as I said before, what frequency? How do they find out about this app? Is this app used with other systems in the company or at home, right? all of this is contextual in terms of how the user is going to be applying the product. And it really will really help building the back end, the front end, the UX by knowing the context that your user is going to be using this in. And then obviously the other things you got to worry about is just the regular things, right? Security, compliance, regulatory, et cetera. I'm not going to touch on that, right? That's documented in a given. I'm looking at the more qualitative aspects of building this product. So next, features and benefits. I alluded to this before. Features are nice and necessary, but sometimes they can be, too much cool stuff, not core to the minimum viable product. They detract from the ease of use, too many controls or menus, right? Don't build that Swiss Army knife, especially early on. And we'll talk about minimum viable product in a minute. Don't build a Swiss Army knife, especially when, a screwdriver and can opener will do. Think in terms of benefits. A benefit is something that almost always saves somebody time or money, or a combination of the two, or reduces risk or increases efficiency, which are really derivatives of time and money, right? So quantify that. Again, if we're building an alert system, a dashboard for executives, we might be saving them time by figuring out what went wrong when they hear that there's a crisis, or being responsive to customers, or it saves them money by let's say getting on top of the problem early and being able to get back and helping the rest of the company fix, let's say, the problems. Or it saves money by giving an early alert, let's say, to running out of capacity before you exceed capacity and really mess up customer relationships. So think in terms of those benefits before you think of features. Good guidance. And again, I referred to this notion of an MVP. We all know it, but let's just kind of parse this apart for a minute. An MVP isn't having your eye on necessarily on what a perfect product needs to look like at the end, because then it really isn't usable early on, and it's not really functional during the middle development. It's really only functional toward the end. This could be months or years, and say your internal customers aren't happy. You want to start with something they could use today, a true 1.0, a true MVP, even if it's only monitoring, let's say, a few things and it's a few dashboards. And you can actually please your customer by letting them know you have updates. We've enhanced the product. They actually love hearing about that. Put something in their hands quickly and say, here's our roadmap, right? You may need to prioritize what this first feature really is in terms of what's their top need for an alert, but give them something that they can use from the beginning. What do they say? Perfection is the enemy of good enough. So again, don't try to build the bee's knees sort of product right out. Build something that they can use, you can get feedback on, you can iterate on, and keep the customer happy all along as you move toward that final product. So, okay, you build this thing, you issue a 1.0, your MVP, there's an alert, people download or install or whatever, and executives, your audience, are going to start to use this thing. So now what do you do, right? Is your job over? And the answer is absolutely not. Don't just, push the code and forget about it, because there's lots of things you probably haven't thought about. What are those? What you want to do, getting back to the important metrics, is encourage and maintain engagement with this product. And this notion of active use is a really, really great proxy for value, right? So if you build something and people use it really infrequently, low value. If you build something and they use it all the time, you've done something good, and you can get frequent feedback all the time. So what are those things? As I said, try to avoid something that people use once and say that was nice and they never need to use it again. How do you do that? Maybe provide reminders or weekly alerts or weekly updates. Maybe the nice thing is, if a customer uses this frequently, you get statistical feedback on how well the product's doing. What are the features they use the most? how to modify or update it, right? Which requires, I put this in parentheses, but it's really important. Don't forget to instrument the product. Not just how often is it run and how often you spin up servers for it, but what features are used, how often, by whom, etc. You don't have to instrument it to the top to the bottom, but enough to give you information about how the product's being used and what people value the most. And if you notice that active use is dropping off, and I'll give you some pointers in a minute, think about ways to encourage people, right? To remind them that they have the product or there's something new or some new alert or whatever, so that they come back and use it and find additional value in your product. Again, this could be a commercial product you sell, or it could be something internal for your company. And your job's not done if you don't share your success. Promote this thing a little bit. And there's some interesting ways to do this, right? You could say, hey, we've deployed this to X number of executives. Or you could say, hey, active use last week was X. Active use this week is X plus something. Glad to see that we have adoption. Or value. You heard that the users are saying this is great. It helps me do my job the following ways. Document this stuff. Because A, the users want to know it. B, your management wants to use it. Wants to know it too. Are there business results that we're providing? Executives now have access, let's say, to infrastructure dashboards. They're using this in new and different ways to woo customers, or their anxiety levels are down because they have a window into what you're monitoring, et cetera. Now, there's one other interesting trick I like to do, and it doesn't apply to every product. But how do you promote outcomes that people don't see? And I call these, kind of this invisible value. Is there value that you're providing with this product? And I'll give you an example in a minute. Value that they don't see. Were there risks that were avoided that nobody gets to view? Right? Nobody cares when things are working fine, and therefore, like if your infrastructure is purring along, they go, "Oh, we don't need this dashboard product you just built." But I'll give you an example. I work for a company called Auth0. You might know them. They do login and security and verification and authentication. And we would sell this product. It was like the login box in your website. And all the customer knew was, hey, I got 1,000 concurrent users logging in every 60 seconds, and there's no delay. Thanks. You've done a great job. Thank you, Auth0. Basically, when we went to go look for renewals on this product, people weren't wowed by it. Right? They're like, thanks, you've got the capacity, people are logging in and they're happy. You know what? I'm not sure I really need your product that much. I feel like I'm paying a little much for it. But then we would show them the invisible value, which is, did you know that we thwarted, 18 billion bots invisibly that were trying to hack your site? Did you know that there were 13 denial of service attacks last month that we thwarted? You never saw those, did you? And when we told the customer that, suddenly the light bulb went on with them. It's like, oh, wow, there's all this invisible value you're providing me that I never knew about. So if you can find ways to provide that invisible value while you're sort of promoting your product, that's fantastic. So you have to think a little bit like a salesperson, a little bit like a marketer, but not too much, just enough to make sure that people see value in your work. So again, think now about how you're going to evaluate the metrics, right? This is the better metrics that we talked about. Evaluate how you did, debrief, discuss with your team, and think 2.0, right? Move my little picture here for a minute. So value, what do your users say was valuable? Was it what you thought it was going to be, right? Did you make money or save money or provide value? Can they quantify it? Get a story. Find out how much time you saved them or how much money we saved the company, et cetera, right? Can you instrument the product and figure out what that active use is? And is it rising or is it stable? Same for the new features that you implement. And that Sean Ellis test. Can your customers, after using this thing for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, live without it, right? Or they might tell you, if you did this one thing, I couldn't live without it. So at the end of your job, at the end of releasing this internal product, go through some of these questions and see if you've hit the mark on most of them, because then you know you've built something good, right? You've defined the problem properly, you've executed on the problem properly, and customers, users find value in it. So that's the majority of what I have to say. I hope you found this valuable. And we'll find ways to get these pointers into your hand, this presentation in your hand, if you want to use some of these slides. So I appreciate the time you spent. And again, hope that this was valuable to you in a way that you can quantify and use offline. Thanks again.